With your work at Simmons Advantage and expertise in transforming urban schools, what are some of the biggest barriers you have seen in education? And how can fathers or mentors work with schools to better support student success?
So, thanks, James. I think a couple of things. The last panel had me really contemplating. Being an educator, to me, the foundation of that is motivation. And to motivate, we have to be connected to, I think, two things. One is inspiration, because when we're working with other people's kids, you want to embody what every parent wants, that their child comes back to them the way that they gave them to you, but actually what they want is for them to be even more excited. Because the first thing that we say as parents is, how was your day, right? And what you're looking for is to hear something that inspired them. And so to connect that as an educator, you want to inspire them, but we also want to provide information. And so as I was listening to the previous panel, I said I would be remiss if I did not provide some information and context for why we do this work, particularly as it relates to the systems of schools and how schools can educate and also miseducate. So just bear with me for a second. So first, when we think about education and incarceration, one is what's called the school to prison pipeline. This is something that directly impacts students of color, particularly black and brown boys. And so when we think about those who are incarcerated, 75% of the black and brown population in prison had what's called an IEP. They were identified to have a special need, and what the school system does is incarcerates them for that. And so you guys, it's important as men that we are partnering and have information that ensures you have the right context for when you're engaging with schools. And so what else does that mean? That the high school graduation rate, students who don't graduate high school are 3 times more likely to be arrested as adults. This is why it's so important that we hold our schools accountable for the contract that they make with you. Each one of your students represents a state allocation that's in excess of $10,000. Are you getting the return on your investment? You are absolutely within your right to be asking those questions. Okay, next. High school graduation rates and incarceration rates. Nearly 80% of individuals in prison don't have a high school diploma. 80% don't have a high school diploma. We were talking about accountability. Raphael was stating this, now it's near and dear to me. I'm a girl dad as well, right? And so trying to figure out how to manage time is critically important. Something that's also important is reading to your kids. Let me tell you what happens when kids don't know how to read. If a kid doesn't read by 3rd grade, they're 4 times more likely to drop out of school. So that means you got from inception, because I was reading to my kids in the belly, where I want you to know my voice before you came out. And those of us who have multiple kids know that you can talk to your kids when they're still in the belly, right? And so that's something that's really important. Here's something else that's really important. I can't wait to hear what the judge has to say about this. Approximately 85% of juveniles who interact with the court systems are functionally illiterate. So this is what I mean when we say school to prison pipeline. The school doesn't do its job in educating, and then they get introduced to the judge, who then has to try and figure out some way to interact because they cannot read. And so how are they then supposed to access all of these great things that we have available in the world if they can't comprehend it? Okay? And so the last thing I would then say is the disproportionate impact on black and brown youth. Black students are 3 times more likely to be suspended from school compared to their white counterparts. So that means for every student that goes to school that is a black child, the contract that the school certifies for them is that they can guarantee to be suspended at least 3 times. That's the gift that the public education system gives to our black and brown students. And so this information is so important because many times you wonder, what's going on at this school? Something doesn't seem right, because it isn't. And so it's panels and conversations like this that are so important. I want to give you that information so that you know if something doesn't seem right, it isn't. Someone who has your child has the responsibility of engaging with your child to bring them back to you better than you gave them to them. All right, so hopefully I get the second question.
I can say, wow. Thanks for sharing that. When you think about the data, right, a lot of people, we take census, you know, we're in reliance to data to, how would I say, cast how we move forward in our life. But what I want you to understand is the longest journey in life is the journey from becoming to knowing. As you mentioned, the literacy issues. You know, when you're not able to read, you kind of create a force field to protect you from the shame. So we have to lean in those spaces. But in respect of time, I want to move on to the next question. Okay, the next question is for Judge Tony McDowell. As a new family division judge, how are you working to make the court system more approachable and effective for families, especially those who may feel overwhelmed by the legal process? Please.
All right, thank you. So when we say new judge, I've been a judge for 4 weeks. So real new, right? Real new. Okay? Yeah. 4 weeks. I've been doing family law my entire legal career, but I've been a family judge for 4 weeks. One of the things that people don't know about how the family court works, and this goes to what Mr. Simmons was talking about, is that I got 2 weeks where I do family law, which we call domestic, divorces, custody, parenting time, child support. And then I do 2 weeks where I do delinquency, so kids who committed offenses that would be crimes if they were an adult. And then neglect and abuse, so children who are in the care of foster care or child protective services because of incidents that are happening at home. And as Kwame pointed out, all of this is connected, right? So when we have a child who's struggling at school, then they might end up on my delinquency docket. That delinquency docket, a lot of the kids who are on that docket end up on that neglect and abuse docket in the long run, which means that we need systems that exist outside of just the legal system. That's why we need community partners that exist outside of the legal system. But going back to my question, which I wanted to respond because Kwame's dead on. All of this stuff is connected. It's all interconnected. But when it comes to being a judge and what I'm doing, one of the things that I was appointed, so I didn't have to go through the election process. I was appointed because of the experience that I had. And that experience has been working at the front of the court and trying to make the front of the court more accessible for the last 10 years. And that's a big hurdle because we're just one of 83 counties in the state of Michigan. We're part of a federal program that involves every single state and involves other countries as well. So that was not an easy task. And now what I do is I deal with one-to-one families. I was dealing with 50,000 cases, 50,000 families at the front of the court, but now I have just the 2 folks who are in front of me. And one of the things that I've been very careful to do is, number one, when you come into court in front of me, which some of you might at some point, is I'm going to do my best to explain to you in a couple of minutes how it's going to go. Because that's one of the big confusions, is people go, wait a second, I thought this was going to be, I got evidence, or I got this, or I got that, and I thought this is how it was going to go because I watched Judge Judy, and I think I got a really good grasp on it, or I watched Law and Order, and I feel like I got a good grasp on it, whatever that may be. And so being able to explain that, this person's going to talk, then that person's going to talk, then this person gets to respond to anything that they say, then I get to talk. And that's the order that this is going to go. And this is gonna take us about 20 minutes. And then, after that goes, then we'll come back and we'll have a longer hearing where you all get to tell me everything you wanna tell me, have evidence and all that sort of stuff. And it's just a little thing to change the dynamic. One of the other things is I've experienced already in the 4 weeks is people coming up at emotionally at a 12, on a 10-point scale, and just saying, let's sit for a second. We don't have to start this right now. And a mom comes in, she's crying, everything in her life has fallen apart, and she had a warrant, and she was afraid I was going to throw her in jail right then and there. I said, let's just take a beat. Take some deep breaths. We'll get to the case in just a minute. I've got to follow the law. I've got to do my job. Educating ourselves about the laws, educating ourselves about the systems is not easy. I'm not saying it is. But I can't fix a car. I don't know how. I never was taught it, and I'm never going to probably learn. It's too late for me. If the car breaks down, I take it to a shop. Right? I know that, and if I'm going to try to fix something, I'm going to watch hours on YouTube to try to figure that thing out. Right? When you come into a courtroom, you at least need to have spent some hours on YouTube. You probably might need to go to a shop, right? These are serious issues that impact are very serious things for families, and I'm not trying to make light of the seriousness of the situation. What I am trying to do is draw a parallel, though. When we have certain things in our life that are a challenge, we acknowledge that it's time to seek help. Seek help. If you feel like you're over your head, seek help. And there's lots of different places and ways to do that and to achieve that. Just like if my car starts smoking, I'm going to not go try to fix it. I'm going to take it to somebody, right? I'm acknowledging that's a place I'm going to need help. But educating ourselves, I take it as my responsibility to educate myself about the families that I'm serving, and I just ask that everybody who's coming in my courtroom has done their best to educate themselves so that they're coming in and we can have a productive time in court. Not necessarily a good time, but a productive time, and that's one of the things that I think is so key.
On the heels of that, because you make an excellent point about trying to educate ourselves, right? I think I want to share with you guys that, based on some older statistics, I think it was 21% of Genesee County could only read at a first grade level. And then when you put Flint specifically, it increased to 36%. And I say that because those are the challenges that we're attempting to overcome when it comes to somebody trying to figure out how I navigate systems that I'm not comfortable with, right? And so if I can just encourage, those of you that are in this room that may find yourself in that situation, lean in and learn, right? Lean in, learn, figure out, talk to people that know more than you do, establish the type of relationships, because we've heard it over and over. It's not what you know, sometimes it's, that's a real thing in real life. There are some things that I have been afforded in my life that were not because I was smart enough to figure it out, but because I had cultivated relationships with people that knew more than I knew. And so if I can go back to, something I said before, right? Try to align who you are in private with who you are in public. Don't be in public acting like you're great and you're supportive and you show up for people, but in private you suck. Because the reality is, I believe in the principle of sowing and reaping. When Shon asked me to be here, guess what I said? I got you. Wow. I'm going to call Shon. And guess what he's going to say? My man. Because there is a principle of sowing and reaping. If you're not sowing into anything and anyone else, think it not strange that when you find yourself in difficult waters, you have no one that you can look to. So what it means is right now, when you don't have a crisis on your hands, you need to be trying to figure out, how do I invest with other people in the spaces that are important to them, so that when I have something happen that's important to me, they're only a phone call away. Because that's what community looks like. The reason that these people on the left side of the wall that are wearing what I'm wearing were willing to show up out here is because they know that I'm willing to show up where they are. That if there's something they need from me, if I have the ability to give it, I'm going to show up with it. Am I perfect? Not in the slightest. But when you show up for other people, then there are people that you can call on that navigate spaces that you don't navigate, that you can say, hey, can you help me with something? Can you tell me about this? Have you ever had to go through something like that? And so as we continue to cultivate relationships with other people, where we don't just show up when there's something for us to gain, but we show up when there's something for us to give. I believe that sometimes things will fall in your lap, that because of the relationships you have with other people, you'll be able to navigate it easier, because there'll be somebody that you can call. Make sure I get your number before we leave.
So taking all that in mind, we would be in ill repute if we didn't take something from this. So out of all of this, the difference between a scavenger hunt and a treasure hunt is when you intentionally know what you're looking for. So everything that was delivered here, take this nugget and put it in your treasure chest. Listen, learn, and communicate.